hiring and retaining talent is not easy, but it is incredibly important. It's one of the most important things that you can do in your business to take it to the next level or continue to function at the level that it's at. So don't take it lightly and do invest time into becoming good at that. How do you create mission, vision, and values that actually matter and aren't just pasted on a wall somewhere that no one's ever going to look at? How do you create a vision big enough that you can have A players that work under you because their vision fits inside of yours? What does that look like? I'll tell you, I work with a lot of businesses, and a lot of times it's...
Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, excited to be here.
Let's get it. So before we go, too deep into the specifics and hey, let's, how do we find the best sales reps in the world is, I do want to go back to just kind of your background about before you were with Closers. I know that you originally came on as a sales rep and we'll talk about that, but even before that, how did you get into like the recruiting space, sales space, overall?
Yeah, great question. So actually started in sales. So cut my teeth in the financial space, started in insurance sales, grew into the financial planning space. So anyone that knows that world, it's like straight commission, make no money forever, 40 dials a day, and then 100 dials a day, just cold calling your neighbors, anyone who fog a mirror. But I actually think you learn a lot from that. So built that financial practice and then actually moved into recruiting for them as well. So helped do that and built out a centralized recruiting system for a large like Fortune 90 finance company. Moved into more of a marketing sales role. So moved into the sales side of things and continued that journey. Elevated. And the next role for me was like past like the VP would have been CEO, and that person really was on the road like 9 months out of the year. Was literally, divorced, no family life, wasn't there for his kids, lived in a hotel, and I just really didn't want that life. It didn't matter what they paid me. I just thought that would really, really suck. So took a gig closing on the side, actually, just to make some extra cash. I thought this was fake, to be totally honest.
Most
I
do,
100%.
or a good amount of people do.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, I'm sorry. No, there's no way you're just going to put qualified calls on my calendar and I just have to close them. That's not a real thing. But it was, started closing on the side and then moved into a full-time gig. I made more money closing part-time than I was as like a VP and director, and took it home. And then I just moved into that full-time. So got into the closing that way.
Amazing. So I think there's a lot of stuff that we can dive into because you've been in so many different roles. I feel like, I wouldn't say everyone is only good at one thing, but because you've just had so much experience in different roles, there's a couple things I want to focus on. So, you were talking about how you were able to grow into like, basically almost CEO. You would have probably got it if you wanted it. But it's like, what would you give as recommendations for people that might be in a company right now and they want to grow and grow quickly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually see a lot of that in the industry now as well. Just because we do so many interviews, we talk to talent, there's a lot of people that have that kind of job hopping mentality. And you'll also hear older people in like careers in corporate that say, oh, millennials don't want to work hard. And that's actually not the case. I think they just want the right opportunity. Right. And so the one thing that I would say on both sides is you have to really be bought in and be willing to work hard. So when you come in with a company, make sure it's a company you can see your growth with long term, that you can grow, but be willing to do the hard work. I talk to a lot of people that go, hey, I want a promotion. Well, that's cool. You haven't hit KPIs yet in your current role. So start there. Crush the role. But then the other piece is if you want that next level, look at what it would take, right? And start doing that work without the promotion,
Yeah.
because then you're the only next solution, right? They're like, oh, we need a VP. Well, this person's already been coaching. This person's already been doing this. This person's taking extra on. They're doing all of these things. It's a logical next step versus, hey, I'm frustrated. I want to make more money and I actually want to be the CEO. And you go, that's great. You actually don't have the skill set to be a CEO. So start with those pieces and put it on yourself, because realistically, you'll either do it with that company or you'll be qualified to do it with a different company and step into that next level of role.
hmm Yeah, I think there's maybe it's just my interpretation of it or what I've seen, but I think there's what's the word? Entitlement has become a lot more prevalent. Especially if there's people that come from, let's say they are in a big or a higher role in at one company, and then they transition over. They're like, oh, I should be like this same thing, or I should grow as quickly. But a lot of times, like you can't expect that if you're not like doing the thing, like you said, doing the things that you should be doing at the bare minimum to then, hit that next level. So from a sales perspective, because I mean, you said, okay, you were in that company, you moved to the other, and you were just, making a ton of money on the closing side. What do you think are some recommendations that you would give to maybe existing sales reps that just to get better at their craft? And I know it's a loaded question, right? We can't go into all discovery and objection handling and things like that, but just maybe some general things you would give to them.
Yeah, for sure. So I think uh, mindset is a big piece of sales. And I know that sounds funny and you can get into the woo woo and all of that stuff, but actually coming at it from a place of gratitude and that you have this opportunity to make more than a lot of doctors. You have the opportunity to make more than lawyers, and you can provide an amazing life for your family, whatever those goals are. You can actually create that without having to invest 9 years in school to do it. Now, you still have to get good, you have to master your craft and all of those things, but starting with that mindset, I think, is incredibly important, and knowing that you can make a huge impact and you have a great opportunity. Where I see a lot of reps fail is they come in and they treat it like they work at Staples for $19 an hour. Instead of, "Hey, I work at a $250,000 a year job, and, I'm gonna treat it like that. I'm gonna show up professionally. I'm gonna work really hard. I'm gonna go the extra mile. I'm gonna do those things, read the books outside, listen to the podcast, develop on my own, do whatever it takes to get better. Hire a coach, doesn't matter. If you were a doctor, you would expect that, right? But I see a lot of people come in and say, "Oh, I actually just want the money, but I don't wanna work at that level." And that's what it actually takes to be good.
So what could you maybe give like some tangibles in terms of like, because you mentioned a couple, right? It's like work hard, show up, every single day. But
Mhm.
anything that you can like even think about when you were like in the trenches, you're like, I'm taking sales calls every single day. What were some of those like two or three things that you did to make sure you're on top of it?
For sure. I would say the big thing is creating like a disciplined day. That is huge. Because as sales reps, you really want to talk to people. That's what you like, right? And so a lot of times we're actually a little bit overly emotional. So when we have a killer day and we close three, we're like, "Oh, I'm on top of the world. I can do anything." And then we have like three blowout days in a row and it sucks and somebody hung up on you and somebody was rude and all those things. And you can just feel like, I just want to like crawl under my desk and drink a bottle of wine, right? And so making those, taking that, reality and going, from this to really, like, leveling yourself out and being consistent is important. So, like, every single morning, when I was a sales rep, I actually got this from Josh Johnson, funny enough, but I would start my day, and in the morning, I would listen to a one sales call. So, one of my top sales calls that was good, I had a whole folder of them, and I would just play them in the background as I was getting ready because it started my mindset in that positive, like, closing, like, "I got this." Even in your subconscious, you're, like, in that pocket already. And then I would listen to a module of 7 FSA. So, I've been through about every sales training that exists, corporate, not corporate. Close training is the best, and that's not, like, because I work here and I'm biased. It's actually so good, and it's really actionable. So I would literally just listen to a module. It doesn't matter. I've listened to I have, like, a little coal on my shoulder all the time now. I just hear his voice in my head.
Yeah, I
But
think
it's
all of
really
us.
right? And so I would just over and over and over, and I started every single day that way. That was really important for me. The other thing that I did to help me visualize where I was at, I have a huge whiteboard in my office. You can't see it because it's on the ugly side, but it's literally like a 6-foot whiteboard. And I would write, so let's say my quota was, 20 people to sell that month or 28. I would start at 28 and I would go negative, like all the way down to one. And every single person I sold, I'd write their name there. So every single month, all day, every day, I'm looking at that board, looking at the people that I was actually making an impact on and seeing the tangible positives to keep me in that mode versus, "Oh, I had 3 calls, this didn't work, I had a no-show," all of those kind of things. And I think that made a big difference.
Yeah. I was literally talking to, I forgot who it was. It's someone that a buddy of mine that's looking to get into the sales space, and he's doing some setting and a little bit of closing right now, and, that was a huge thing that I recommended to him was like, "Hey, sometimes you're gonna feel like you're at the top of the world, but I think the mistake that a lot of people make is, like, they take that feeling of being on top of the world, and they're like, 'Well, I'm good. I, like, made these sales,' and then you get out of the habit of doing the things that got you there in the first place." So, like you said, just, like, making it like, not only, like, I think habit's a good word, but just like a non-negotiable, right? Like non-negotiable every single day. You're doing this, right? You're listening to a sales call and putting yourself in that right mindset. So I think that's huge for a lot of people. It could be huge for a lot of people. Um, so okay, so I guess now in the story we're at, so you come on board as a closer. So what was kind of like the next steps in there? What made you transition from like the closing side into basically being like the main recruiting person?
Yeah, so, closed on my first offer. I would say that's another misconception too, is people come in and they want a closing they're like, it's my first closing gig, I'm gonna make $30,000 a month." And it's like, "Hey, why don't you just start and make 10 grand a month, do it consistently for a year, and then you can try something more
Mm,
advanced."
yeah.
Uh, so worked on an offer. Um, I would say average probably about like 14K a month consistently. Consistent closes, decent calendar. It was a great offer. Um, that business owner ended up really wanting to like retire out of her business. So she stopped enjoying her business and really wanted to spend more time like on the beach in Mexico with her kids and wanted to dial back her business. So we had like just a mutual conversation of I didn't have the opportunity for growth there anymore. But it was a great opportunity. I was there for I don't know, a year and a half or so. It was great. Transitioned out, trained my replacement, left in a really, really positive light and had a recommendation from her. I actually found Igor, who was our account manager. He used to coach us, and I was in his DMs every single day for probably 3 months. Be like, "Hey, man, you gotta hire me. Hey, I'm gonna come work for you. You don't get a choice. So I'm gonna work here." Uh, so I I bullied my way in because I knew it was the best place, right? And if I was a big fish in a small pond, I need a bigger pond. That's how I always look at it. So I wanted a new challenge. I wanted to be the worst person on the team and, to grow. So I actually interviewed as an account manager, to come in, and, Mitchell Miles at the time called me and said, "Hey, I actually think you need to go and do sales." And I was like, "Man, I don't wanna do sales. I already did sales. I wanna be an account manager. That's what I wanna do." But I thought, if you can't sell, like, how do you deserve the opportunity to be an account manager? And I actually think that's a really important thing. Like, a lot of people think they're better than they are, but if you're that good, you should be able to come in at the ground floor and work your way up.
Yeah.
To kinda, like, put your money where your mouth is, and so I thought, "Let's do it." So came in and started on the sales side, which is great. Proved myself, hit my KPIs, closed on STA, and did not really successfully. And then, was in talks of moving into the account manager role. So they said, "Hey, you earned your stripes. Now it's time we can move into that." But because of my past experience in recruiting, and where the company was going, they asked if I would do a little bit of consulting, help out on the recruiting front. And so I started doing that, really enjoyed it. And then the opportunity was presented to actually just move over and become an executive on that side. So that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, no, I love it because I distinctly, like, remember I don't know why, but it's one of those things where it's like you remember something, and it's like you just remember, like, everything about that. For whatever reason, I remember being on a Zoom call on the marketing meeting, and this was probably I mean, at this point, probably 2.5 years ago, maybe? When did you join?
Yeah, almost 3 years ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah. So it's probably like 2.5 years, and I just remember, because we would go through the marketing metrics, and it was just like every time we look at, like, closers and we look at the closers KPIs, and it's like, "All right, Kate hit. Everyone else, they're struggling. Kate hit." And I was just like, "Damn, like, this Kate girl is crushing it, like, she's doing something different." And then, I just remember, like, the conversation also happening, like, "Oh, yeah, like, Kate's actually gonna be jumping into recruiting." So I remember that really distinctly. So okay, so what would you because one thing that you said in there was, you wanted to originally come into a specific role, and then you got into a different one, and then even, like, the account manager one that you wanted to go into, you still went into recruiting. So maybe advice or, like, takeaways to really just, like, even though it might not be the role you want immediately, like, kind of build into that role to hit the where you're ultimately looking to go.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes into belief in yourself and a long-term vision. I think if you're in sales, no matter what, you have to know that there are no easy way out. And it doesn't actually matter if you're sales or any other career, right? You want to be a doctor? Cool. You got to go to school like for 8 years. You want anything that has that return, you have to put something into it. There is no easy button in life. And so if you're going to come into a role and you want this long-term vision, let's say you want to be a sales manager, you want to be a CRO, you want to be a CEO, you have to be willing to get in at the ground floor. Tomorrow, if my, team was in trouble, I would get on and set my own calls. I would do whatever it takes to hit that result and never think that I'm better than that ever. And so if you're not willing to do that, I think that's a big something you have to look at deep down, because to be that top closer, to be that next level, to continue to move up, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes.
Amazing. So I think this goes is a natural progression into I think the part that a lot of people are wondering about in terms of okay, cool. How do I find salespeople? How do I lead them? How do I build a good culture? All that type of stuff. But before we do that, maybe just like a quick kind of run through because someone might be listening and they're like, well, why should I listen to Kate about my recruiting and getting them in? Getting more people in my team. So just like high level, some of the people that you've been able to personally like consult with in closers.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So, I think the first thing to speak to is the team. So, we have a team of 21 people on the team. We have a dedicated whole team that is all they do is headhunt and source and poach and get in with these great people and bring the top talent. They're phenomenal, and I've taught them everything I know, which is great. Part of that comes in being a good sales organization, right? But my team on average place about 130 salespeople every single month consistently. So we do it at a volume that very few people actually do. And then obviously we place executive roles, things like that as well. Us personally, if you look at some of the clients that you may know or heard of, you've got Cardone Ventures. We place probably 10 to 15 salespeople a month for them on a consistent basis, every single month. And you look at companies like Pampa, we just placed 34 sales reps in the last 8 weeks. So it's definitely something we can do. The probably most exciting thing about that, when they came to us, they had a 60% churn rate of new reps, right? And we see that a lot in larger companies. They have kind of a mass volume, they have a big sales team, but they see a huge amount of churn. And so they can't put as much money into each hire because they know the likelihood of that person sticking is way lower.
Yeah.
So we put them actually down. We just did their math. They have a 30% churn rate staffing with us right now. And I think we can get it even lower, which is awesome.
That's crazy, and, like, even just listening to that, I think the 60% probably is, like, making some people cringe because 'cause they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's, like, my churn rate," or, like, maybe even higher. It's like, I churn literally every single person I bring on. So, I think there's obviously a lot to say, and I'm glad that you brought in the team aspect, and it just shows that, like, it's not just about Kate, it's about, like, the entire team, but for someone that might be, let's say they're looking for their first sales rep or they're looking for their first setter or things like that. I guess let's just run through kind of the method outside of click the link in the description and book a call with us so we can just do it for you. Outside of that, what would you give some recommendations like where can I find this person? What are like some general questions that I could ask? Just you have this process down to a T. So just beginning to end, what would you do?
Yeah, great. Um, so yeah, I mean, the easiest solution is if you work with somebody that does this and this is all they do, they take a lot of this work off of your plate. So that's probably the easiest thing is to have that coaching and development. I would say where I actually was just reading a study and it said where 95% of businesses actually find their bottleneck and they can't grow is because they have an inability to retain and find top talent. That is it. That's what holds all businesses back. Brick and mortar doesn't matter from being able to achieve what they want to and grow. So first thing is like you're not alone. Hiring is hard. It just is. There is no magic solution, and there's never going to be 100% uh, accurate. Here, do this, follow this, and do this, and you're going to get it right every single time. So if you're first hiring, this is your first sales rep, and you're just figuring out how this works for your business, know that no matter how much work you put in on the front end, you got a 50-50 shot at the end of the day. All indicators can be green, and this person could sound and have a background and be amazing, and they still might not work out. So don't be afraid to pull the trigger, get people in, give them the shot, and let them do the work. And then if they don't work, absolutely get them out and replace them right away. Um, but know that if you're just starting out, that's a real thing, and you're probably going to potentially turn through a couple of reps to figure out what works.
Yeah. So if we did like a speed round of like, okay, first question, where can someone find a good sales rep, setter, closer?
Yeah. Um, so honestly, the first thing that I would say if I'm a business owner and I'm trying to find a good sales rep is start with your network. I find that the number one thing for sales reps to work is buy-in, conviction, and belief in what you do, right? If they're going to sell something, they've got to believe in you. So if you start with your own network, they've already done that. So for people that have, an offering, like look at your clients. Who have you worked with that you've crushed it for that could potentially come and sell for you, that want to rep you, that want to sell you, that want to duplicate that for every single person because they've already got a story and they can sell it, right? And then we can teach them the sales side. But that's something they have to have those sales indicators, right? So maybe past history of sales or, all of those things that I would look at. But that's where I would start. Obviously, you can always go into social media, the job boards, all of that stuff, LinkedIn, but realistically, you're fishing in a very large pond. So I would recommend that you start with your own network first and then branch out from there if you're not seeing the type of candidate that you want.
Perfect. So if we take the next step of so they apply, right? You reach out to the network, you talk to people on LinkedIn. What are like maybe some of the key questions that it's like every single interview you need to ask these questions? And then part two, well, no, just hit that first, then we'll hit part two.
Okay, cool. So I always look at a few different things when I'm interviewing. You're going to create your own, script and things that work for you. If you've hired before and somebody has failed in the role, I want to look at why did that person fail, and I'm going to bring in questions to make sure that I'm looking at that. Right. So let's say you have a salesperson that was lazy. They didn't do what they wanted. They never hit their KPI, and because they just weren't motivated to hit, top numbers. Okay. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm going to go back into that and say, "Hey, can you give me an example on your team of, when you've come from, the bottom 50% up into the top 25%? What did that look like?" Make them actually talk to you about it because you're also going to look at their mindset, their how they think about things, their critical thinking, as well as the actual answer to the question. Also, I ask a lot of questions. First of all, I wanna look at buy-in, so why this opportunity? Why does it excite you? I know it sounds silly, but I wanna know, did you do your research? Are you really bought in? Is that a 5 out of 10 answer, a 10 out of 10 answer? Is this person willing to eat glass to work here? I want that. I really do, right? And so I'm gonna look at those things. And then other things too is, in past performance, how did you compare? A lot of people miss that. So they'll ask things like, "Oh, what's your closing rate and your KPIs and all that stuff?" What I actually wanna know is, "Okay, so you were on a team of 6, where'd you rank? Why?
Mm,
For how long? What did you do about that?" I wanna know more of those questions to really see, like, how did they stand out and perform. Any rep can tell you, "I have a 60% close ratio, and I collected 90,000 a month in cash," and all this stuff, and, it could be real, it could be fake, but those questions rarely, are made up.
yeah. It's like, even just hearing you say that, I think you literally gave like the compare contrast of like a lot of people that are trying to find setters and closers are probably just asking those basic questions of like, how much money have you made? What was cash collected? Things like that. But like, even just listening to you say that, it's almost like these have to be sales calls. Like they're literally sales calls with the other person. And I think like, obviously because you also have the sales experience, it's like you've been able to, obviously do a lot better at that. So I think that's huge. And, for anyone listening, it's just like, yeah, you want to dig into these questions and like go a little bit deeper than again that high level stuff. So any red flags in interviews or applications that you're just like 100% like run for the hills.
For sure. So the only other thing I would add before we get into that is, how in discovery calls and sales, 90% of the coaching that you give is like, okay, you got to chunk down, right? Chunk down again.
Mhm.
Same thing in an interview. And don't be afraid to do that. What I see a lot of times, humans are conditioned to lie, and they probably won't give you the correct answer the first time, right? You walk into a grocery store, you see someone, "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, I'm good." "Awesome. How are you?" "Good." But if you take a second and you go, "Are you actually good?" They're like, "Oh, actually, I'm going through a divorce and blah, blah, blah," and, all those kind of things. They're not gonna tell you that right away, but if
Yeah,
you take
exactly.
a
Yeah.
second, they will. So do the same thing when you're interviewing. Really ask the question and don't be afraid to dive deeper into that. That's important. Um, And then I know you said red flags, so I digressed. But with red flags, um, so negativity is a big one. You want somebody positive. So anybody that's crap talking their last employer, comes with a negative energy, victim mindset, right? It was all their fault. It was the leads, it was the marketing, whatever. 100%, I won't even interview them. I don't want to lead somebody like that. It's exhausting. They will never have extreme ownership, and take that next step. Now, if the marketing really did suck in their last offer, they can tell you that, but you wanna look at how they speak to those things and make sure that it's not a victim mentality. "Gotcha, so the marketing sucked. Can you give me some examples of what you did in that situation? What'd you do to try and hit your KPIs? Was it possible? Got it. So you did this, you did this, you did this. What else?" Right? And so you really wanna look at those things versus, I've worked for 3 companies. They all sucked. Business owners sucked. Everything sucked, couldn't make the money. So I really look for that. That's one of the first things, that I look for. The other thing is job hopping. So, in this industry, it's a little bit different, right? Because average person on a sales op in the high ticket space, like, less than 12 months. So know that that's a
Really?
yeah, it is.
Interesting.
Reps that we place, it's closer to 24 months, but, generally, it's, less than 12 in this industry. So just know if you see somebody that was on an offer for 12 months and then they change to another offer, that's okay, right? But you wanna see patterns of success and growth. So if they were on an offer selling a 6K product for a year and they had a great close ratio and then they moved, now they're selling a $15,000 product, it's a difficult sell, their income's up, those are okay. What you don't wanna see is, I was a setter on a company for 3 months. Then I was a setter on a company for 2 months. And then I went and worked for this other company for a month and a half. Now I've been with this other company for 3 weeks, and I'm already on an interview with you.
Yeah, so just, like, making sure that you because like you said, it's like when they're constantly saying it was the other person's fault or they've been on all these different offers, it's like, who's to say they're not gonna do literally the exact same thing in 3 months or 4 months or whatever, so, I think all that's huge. One thing you mentioned a little bit ago is, like, you got the 60% churn down to the 30%. What are some main things that you guys do and we do, right, as a company to help these other business owners? Because and just to clarify one thing too quickly too, is I think a lot of people, they just look at us as like, they just like recruit. It's like, yeah, we recruit, but we also like stick with you long term to make sure that the churn stays on and all those things. So, you know, main tips to help just decrease churn.
For sure. Yeah, so one of the things that we do that I think is really impactful is that we go in depth before we even recruit for you. So we really look at every metric of your business, what it looks like, your implementation pathway, where your business is today. And then we actually develop a custom strategy specifically for you. Recruiting is actually similar to like building out a custom funnel, right? And so you're really figuring out what's my audience, what's my avatar, what's my unique selling proposition, what makes me unique, who wants to work for me, all of those things. So my team actually creates that. So a custom scorecard on like what is your offer, where do you need to be, we consult on that, and then we also will create an opportunity overview that you can go to market with. So you can put it in your personal stuff, and then we'll use it also to attract the right talent. So that's a big piece. Is just doing that correctly. Most people don't know how to do that correctly, and the stuff that is put out there, isn't going to get them the right results. The other thing, that's incredibly important is we go through and help you like custom through the interview process. So if you need a one-on-one interview because you're recruiting a VP, right? The whole process is going to be completely different than if you're recruiting a setter and we need 6 setters on your team tomorrow. So we do that based on what's going to be best for you to get results as quickly as possible. Then probably the biggest thing that I see that's different is we actually help you with the ramp up process. So, first of all, our reps are guaranteed. So, if any of them don't work out, we replace those within 45 days. So, you don't have to worry about bringing the wrong person in. But also, we actually help you ramp that rep. So, we have a ramp call, we have rubrics, we have training, all of these things to get your rep to KPI in that first 30 days. That's huge, right? You can make a great hire. And if you don't have the infrastructure to get them up to KPI, it's not going to matter. Cole always talks about putting Dale Earnhardt in a Honda Civic. right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So we help you with the systems and the coaching. We actually have extra call reviews, things like that, to get those people up to speed much faster, and that can move the needle in a big way.
Love it. And that was like a great I mean, I think this is a good time for like a mid-roll. If you want our help, again, link down in the description, click that. For someone that's watching that's maybe maybe they want to gamble a little bit and they want to try it themselves first. Like any key things that you would say, here's just the two or three I don't know, it's not two or three, there's a lot more, but some main things that attribute to churn and then I guess how they could combat that.
For sure. So a couple things to keep in mind if you're doing it on your own. First thing, if you're doing it on your own, you can't do one or two interviews. You probably need to interview like 15 or 20 people. So fill your calendar and actually do the work because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know who you like, who you don't like, all of those things until you do more than a few interviews. So get in there and do that. Know that you're going to have to devote some time. The other thing is make sure you're moving quickly. Most sales roles are 1099 and or commission based, or there's some sort of incentive there where the salesperson doesn't come in and make the money they need to day one, right? So what I see as a big red flag a lot of times is people's interview process, business owners, will be super long. I'm gonna have you do the 35 personality tests and 12 interviews, and you're not gonna hear from me for a week and all of that stuff. Well, guess what? Great people, great salespeople are never gonna be without a job, and they probably have 3 other people talking to them. So make sure that you're competitive and you're moving through the process quickly. So, have as many touch points as you need to feel comfortable, but don't, take 5 weeks to hire somebody. Get them in, have another interview within 24 hours, have whatever testing you need if you feel like you need that, and then give them that shot and get them started, especially in the sales piece. It's incredibly important when you're talking about sales reps.
How much should someone pay a setter or a closer?
Depends on the offer for sure and the opportunity. So just know that. On the setter side, I would say to get somebody really good, you probably need to be, industry and markets dictating right now about 5 to 6K a month consistently. I always start with OTE and back into that depending on the opportunity. So if it's an inbound setter, right, just doing inbound leads, things like that, you're probably going to have to pay a base of like 2,500. The rest can be commissions. If you are doing strictly outbound, right? They're cold calling, lead generation, all of that stuff. Know that most of that is going to be base. So 4,500 to 5 grand base plus a little bit of commissions, bonus incentives. But just know that that needs to be the case depending on the opportunity. And then closers, I would say, minimum for a good closer, they need to be able to make 10K a month. Really, really solid opportunities now, what we're seeing in the industry, about 15K a month. If they have that ability, that's great. And so that would be kind of where you need to be. Top tier opportunity, best people in the whole industry. You can get it whoever you want. You got to be in that 20 to 30K range.
And, for those specific, for each roles, obviously it's gonna be very different based on each one. But anything that you would say specifically, okay, this is good qualities of a setter, good qualities of a closer. I know they might be similar, but I know some people like just want to be a setter. A lot of times they're just like the setter for life, right? Kind of like a forever high school senior. But yeah, any key traits on each one.
Yeah. So a lot of times as a setter, that person is going to eventually want to be a closer. That's one thing I actually see business owners get really turned off by a lot of times. Don't be scared if your person wants to grow and develop. So just know that I just have to say that because I talk to business owners all the time about that. They're like, oh, this person said they want to be a closer one day. I don't want to hire them. And I'm like, that's very silly. So bring them on and give them the chance, but be realistic that they'll need to be in that role for, 6 months to a year and hit KPIs before they're able to move into a role and make sure they're committed to that. On the setter side, you really want somebody that's willing to, I use the eat glass kind of thing. They have to be willing to do whatever it takes in high activity. Realistically, an SDR role, an MDR role, they're hard. So don't pretend that they're not. It's a hard role. And so you need somebody that has a chip on their shoulder. They have something to prove and they're willing to do whatever it takes. Lots of activity that may not be super fun to get where they want to go in life. Right. That's what I look for, that grit, that grind. On the closer side, You really need somebody that, I think has a high integrity and high motivation personally. So you want somebody that, has that why, has a lot of intrinsic motivation, right? It's not just about the money, but like they're motivated by excellence in every area of their life. That's going to be a really good salesperson because they won't accept anything else. So that's something that I look for in sales, that past history of success and that past history of being that top 1%er at any company you've worked for, and continued growth.
So, one thing that comes to mind on that piece, right? And you mentioned it earlier too about building like a good company culture and becoming a company that people want to be a part of because they need to explain like why they want to be a part of that. But anything that you can think of in terms of that we give to to clients to be like, hey, like here's how you build a good culture that people want to be a part of.
Honestly, it's one of the best things about being a client with us is there is so much information when you work with us on how to actually lead your team. So down to the nitty gritty of how do you run a sales call or a sales team meeting, right? All the way up to high level vision. How do you create a mission, vision, and values that actually matter and aren't just pasted on a wall somewhere that no one's ever going to look at? Right? How do you create a vision big enough that you can have A players that work under you because their vision fits inside of yours? And what does that look like? So we really help on every single avenue or every single level of that. Um, I'll tell you, I work with a lot of businesses and a lot of times it's 50-50, right? 50-50 is like the rep didn't work out. Sometimes it's like, hey, like who would want to work for your business, right? And not in a bad way, but like you gotta be that leader. You gotta show up. You have to show up on time. You can't show up for an interview in a hoodie late on your phone and expect somebody to show up consistently early on a daily meeting and do all of those things. So we help a lot of people with that leadership piece. And like, how do you develop that culture a lot of times in a remote setting where people do show up on a high level and they're A players, not like C level salespeople.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big thing that I've even noticed because I host the organic calls and, obviously we don't talk like a ton about sales, but, someone will be like, oh yeah, like they're on the call anyway. So they're like, do you have thoughts on like this about like, sales or whatever, their closer or setter. And, I always just ask them would you like, okay, cool. Like they're not booking the calls. Like, why aren't you booking the calls? Right. Like stepping into that role of like, if you expect, like, why would you expect someone to do something that you're not actively doing yourself, So yeah, I think that's huge. And, a lot of times people don't want to admit that it might, if they've gone through 15 closers and they're like, why does no one want to stay here? It's like, well, there's probably something wrong with the system. So, um, like anything that comes to mind is kind of last couple things here. Any like misconceptions or like not misconceptions, like mistakes that you feel like just big mistakes that people make when it comes to hiring, maybe firing as well. Just anything that comes to top of mind.
Yeah. So a couple of them. The first mistake, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is just taking too long to hire, right? So, like, ask what you need to ask, but realistically know that you're still only making an informed decision at best. Maybe all the indicators are green, but give that person a shot, especially when it comes to sales. When you're in sales, like you just don't know. I could have the fanciest resume and all of those things, and you don't know if I'm going to show up and actually do the hard work. So part of that is like give that person a try and don't make that interview process take forever. You think about the opportunity cost of, yeah, you might have somebody come in and churn and you get somebody in right away to replace them versus I've watched business owners take 3 or 4 months to hire. And you think, wow, if you would have just hired in the beginning, you could have replaced somebody 3 times by now. And you would definitely have a closer that's closing. So don't be afraid of that. Um, the other thing that I would say that I see a lot of times, and when I talk to business owners, is they come in with this wish list, right? So, hey, I need a sales professional, and I want them to have 5 years of experience in this. They need a PhD doing this. They need to have been at their last job for 8 years. They like, right? And so I call it the unicorn list. That's all great and fine, but know that realistically, you're not going to find somebody that checks all those boxes. And so you have to figure out what are the top like 2 or 3 things. So when I look for sales talent, I'm looking for buy-in, number one. And then I'm looking for acumen overall. So like industry acumen, right? Do they have past experience, life experience, things like that that lend well to selling your offer? And then specific offer experience. Have they sold on this offer specifically, for a competitor and done well, that kind of thing? You're probably not going to get all three. Buying is number one to me, always. But just know that the most important thing when you have a setter or a closer is, can they sell? Do they have good sales skills? Because I watch a lot of people hire people that they like, that have this background and these things that look amazing. And, they've been, like I said, they had a PhD and a master's and all of these other things, but they can't sell. And so make sure that that's the main thing. If you're hiring for a closing role, you need somebody that can close. You can teach the rest, right? But you need somebody that can close. Same with the sellers.
Amazing. One kind of like off the wall question, but you had a baby recently. Well, I guess not recently, like a year ago. I think there's probably a lot of moms out there that are like grinding and hustling and things like that. Like any recommendations? Because you obviously you perform at a very high level. Like you manage a crazy amount of people. So maybe just like last thing, any recommendations for the hustling moms out there?
Yeah. So I do. I have an 8-month-old, and she's the greatest thing ever. So I feel very blessed. You can speak to that because you have at least a million kids.
15 of them,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. But they're phenomenal. Um, I would say, so the hustling mom out there, the first thing that I think is important is knowing that you can do it, right? The only limitation out there is the one that you put on yourself. Now, also, I think it's important that you're realistic. Just because you're working does not mean that you also need to, cook and clean and raise a baby and take like whatever. Look at your support and be realistic about that, right? Nobody's going to be able to work 150 hours a week and sustain that into perpetuity while doing X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. So get really efficient with your time, get help when you need it, and make sure that you structure yourself for long term success and not just this burnout phase of I'm doing everything all at once and I'm miserable and I hate all of it, right? And you can't be present in any of those pieces. So I'm not a big like, oh, like, you can have it all and the wealth and all these things. You can just do it and do it be realistic to yourself that, those things are important. They take time. So get help in other areas.
Mhm. And I think, having the sales background too, with myself included is I think communication is big too. It's like when I first started my, online business in like 2017 and, was building it out and we didn't have kids at the time. But as obviously we started having more kids, we have four, it like obviously the priorities and time changes. And I think for me, and maybe this is because I'm a guy, is like I used to be really bad at communication and it was just like I
Mhm.
kept a lot of things bottled in. So it was like it wasn't until I was like, "Okay, like, I should, like, communicate that," or no, maybe not even necessarily me communicating, but, like, hearing out my wife, if that makes sense? So, yeah, I agree. I think you can have it all just in you can't have all of it, right? But it's like you just setting the right expectations that, okay, like, I am I'm yeah, setting the right expectations that you're still getting a lot of things, you know? Um
Yeah, maybe a better way to say that is you can have it all, but you can't do it all.
There you go.
So, yeah, so just, like, set yourself up for success, in that regard.
There we go. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not even just saying this, I think this was probably one of my favorite episodes, Don't Tell Spencer, because he was the last one. But, yeah, I mean, I think anyone that's listening to this could get a ton out of, if they're gonna do it themselves, cool. But, on top of that, obviously, if you want our help and Kate obviously gave a huge, shout out a couple times of just the things that we can do and help you do. One of the main takeaways is, like, there's just so much opportunity cost in this. We've seen people all the time. It's like they'll come on a call with us on a sales call and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go like try this myself." And it's not just like the 1 month that you try to figure out doing it. It's also the revenue and the cash that you lose out on by having to not only not have those calls because you don't have enough time in the day, but also I mean, just yeah, I mean, just a massive opportunity cost along there. So if you are seeing this and you want to skip all that headache, go ahead and click the first link down in the description. Also, the link down in the show notes is going to bring you over to just a really quick video that's Cole, the CEO of Closer.io, put together, and really just breaks down exactly how we do it, what we do, and obviously there's no pressure to jump on a sales call. And if you do, it really is just an opportunity for us to learn more about you, your business, and then just point you in the right direction. If we think we can help, great. We'll talk about what that looks like. If not, obviously we'll point you in the right direction. It might just be to Cole's YouTube channel, this YouTube channel, while we interview people from the team. So, Kate, anything you want to leave people with? Put you on the spot.
Hmm. I know, right? That's a tough one. I would just say that just know that hiring and retaining talent is not easy, but it is incredibly important. It's one of the most important things that you can do in your business to take it to the next level or continue to function at the level that it's at. There's probably nothing more important. You'll hear Hormozis, anybody big talk about that. It's really all about talent. So don't take it lightly and do invest time into becoming good at that.
Let's go. We'll end it on that one. So for those of you that are listening, again, last time, go ahead and click the link down below. Kate, thank you so much for hanging out with us and sharing the knowledge. If you guys have any questions, if any questions, drop a comment. Also like the video if you liked it. Also subscribe if you haven't already. See you guys on the next episode. Talk soon. Peace.